Hey, folks, and welcome. This is Inside the Leader's Mind, where what's in the way becomes the way. I'm David Suson. I am so excited for my guest today, Sonya Weigle. She's the CEO of Next Stage Bio Advisors. She specializes in guiding early stage biotech companies through their most critical phases. She brings over 25 years of experience and expertise in building scalable organizations, securing investor confidence, and navigating the complex human capital challenges that make or break biotech ventures. Sonya also finds great meaning as the CEO and founder of the Catalytic Collective, a community for C-suite women who, like herself, are creating new ventures for their next chapter after 20 plus years of corporate experience. Folks, please welcome Sonya Weigle.
Thanks, David. It's really, really good to be here with you this morning. Thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to have you. I would love to just start by telling us a little bit about what you do and then kind of the path of how you got where you are. And you can start either place.
Sure. Yeah, my path was a bit circuitous, and it's really landed me where I am today. That's the circuitous nature of what I've been able to do. So what I do currently as a CEO of Next Stage Bio Advisors is I do advise early stage biotech companies, particularly the CEOs and their executive teams, to help them get from the clinic into a full-blown company or out of an R&D situation and into full commercialization. And so I help them deal with all of the organizational and cultural changes that have to happen in order to successfully navigate those two things. And that really is birthed from the 25 plus years of experience that I've had in the life sciences doing M&A integration as a consultant. The reason I do it on my own is because 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago now, when I was pregnant with my second baby and traveling all of the time, and my first baby was calling the nanny mommy, I said, there's got to be a way to do what I love to do, to provide for my family, but also to raise my kiddos. So that's when I stepped out, started my own business, ended up with a third, and have had to really navigate the idea of growing my business while I raise my family. I'm now, my husband and I are 29 years into this, and we've got 3 grown children, the youngest of which is a senior at NYU. And so we're now looking at this empty nest. And with that, I looked at how I'm doing things now and how that can change and how I can now sort of declare it my time. And so with this empty nest and these 20 plus years of experience, it's like, okay, how do I want to navigate this next chapter and do it differently and in a way that serves me more? And how can I help other women in that same stage of life do the same thing? And that's how I sort of birthed the Catalytic Collective. And now, as you mentioned, I take tremendous joy in connecting with other really powerful, very experienced, very credentialed women, very successful women, and helping them to navigate that next chapter.
Very cool. So are you doing both now?
I'm doing both. Yes.
And is that okay? So I want to go back for a moment to the biotech, and I've worked in that biotech space doing some training and consulting before. What are the biggest challenges that you see working with a biotech leader who's been in the lab? They're a scientist, they come up with this, but now they've got to learn how to run a company if they want to grow it, make it profitable, and not just be this lab of, oh, that's a cool approach, that's a cool tech.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. What makes them fantastic, skilled, successful as scientists, the ones that can go in and discover these molecules, develop a drug or the concept of a drug, the things that make them really, really successful there can be kind of the headwinds that prevent them from perhaps being a successful CEO. So, in the lab, it's very consensus driven, right? You've got to bring all of the perspectives together to gain alignment, which is a good thing to do. But in a CEO situation, that analysis paralysis that can sometimes come, the tendency towards collaboration and consensus, in a biotech environment, in a very fast-moving early-stage drug development environment, can often prevent you from moving ahead at a pace that's going to be attractive to investors, that's going to be attractive to the market. If you are in companies in that stage need CEOs to make quick decisions and sometimes very decisive moves that don't necessarily always involve the level of collaboration that they're used to. So, helping them to get to a place where, okay, I'm going to lead in a transformational way, and I'm going to hire in a transformational way, and I'm going to be very strategic, not just in terms of I&D and development milestones, but the financial milestones and other things that will give your investors and your board confidence not only just in you, but in your ability to build a team at scale very quickly. So those are sort of the disconnects that I often lean into.
So it's interesting you use the term, like in your bio, you talk about human capital. When you look at some of the companies you've worked with, and you see one is more successful, a lot more successful than another. I mean, sure, they can be decisive, take action, get it done, but it can be a train wreck, I imagine, right? What do you see as the difference? And where does this human capital piece come in?
I think where I've seen it work really, really well, whether it's a merger and acquisition or it's a startup, is you have a leader, a CEO, and the two or three people who often it is that's building this team together. They're building with the end in mind, and they're creating the environment that they want to exist in. So they're defining what success looks like from a set of leadership competencies, behaviors, and the organizational culture. They're planning that first, so that as they bring people in, and as they bring in investors, board members, vendors, everyone is aligned with this picture of what they see as success is. Whether that is, we want to be a consensus-driven organization, we want to be an organization that makes decisions very quickly, whatever it is, they're very clear, and they have memorialized it in a way that we can, as they scale quickly, evaluate everybody through the lens of the culture as they've defined it. So that's how we're going to manage our talent acquisition process. That's how we're going to manage the performance once they get in, right? So it's always going to tick and tie back to what they decided at the beginning. And it evolves and it grows and it changes, but there's always sort of a foundational true north that everybody in the organization and around the organization can tick and tie back to say, okay, this is what we've decided good looks like. And this is how we're going to evaluate people who come in, and we're going to evaluate performance while they're here.
So it's that whole begin with the end in mind. If you look, guesstimate percentage of the companies you've worked with over the many years, what percentage of leaders do you think that is a natural ability where they look at it, not just, I got to make a buck and we got to get it to market quickly, because human capital is such a huge part of that. And if everyone's not on board and you're not doing what you said, hiring right, moving in the right direction, it's a mess. But if you look percentage wise, what percentage would you say that's a natural ability versus this is something we really have to train them to do?
It's interesting. I think there are very few people for whom this is a natural ability, because in some ways it's sort of counterculture, like I said before, with what made them successful on the scientific side to begin with. But I've been very, very fortunate in my last several CEOs who tend to have that natural ability, even if they don't know how to sort of curate that in a way where that's a day-to-day sort of leadership contractor or way of operating. My last CEO that I worked with, that started out as a consulting arrangement, and it started out because he was brought on board to commercialize an organization. And to his credit, he started with, hey, can you come in here and do an assessment, talk to us about leadership behaviors and culture, and let me know, do we as an organization and do my leaders have the skills, the competencies, the behaviors, do we have the culture to successfully commercialize, because you've got an R&D company that's been R&D for a long time. And now in order to commercialize, you're going to bring in this juggernaut of commercial folks. This, the tissue rejection that happens there is almost always, right? That's probably 100%. But planning with that in advance, this was something that I just, that was actually probably the first time a CEO came to me on the front end to say, let's plan for this. So to whatever extent that we're not ready, let's get ready, and then let's go. I mean, 80% of M&A transactions fail post-transaction because they haven't thought about these things from the front end. I've done one where it was a large pharma that was very consensus driven, huge in the market, merging with a smaller one that was very, very quick, very nimble. And so then you bring these two together and say, well, which culture do we choose? On the front end, it's, do we do this transaction or not? So, where I've had most of my success is when I'm working with venture or private equity, and they are utilizing me as part of their due diligence team to say, we're going to have 2 CFOs. Which one do we pick? We have 2 cultures. Which one drives it? Should we do this deal? Is it going to work out at the end? Or are people going to say, yeah, this is not how we do things, right? So, the most successful transactions are thinking about that ahead of time.
Love that. And I'm such a huge advocate of exactly what you talked about, right? Defining a culture. You hire to the culture, you do all that. It's interesting that, and there's a question here. I think my experience has been they marginalize the term human capital. When I first heard this many, many years ago, I'm like, what do you mean by human capital? And I had to think about what that really meant, right? We've got capital expenditure, right? We've got buildings, we've got cars, we've got, all this stuff, furniture. But humans were not considered an investment from a capital standpoint. And my experience has been the companies I consult with, I work with, I speak with, I think they marginalize the impact that they could have if everyone in an organization was just 10% better, 10% more engaged, 10% more motivated, 10%. In the companies you've worked with, once you talk to them about this, and be honest, you don't throw any of your clients under the bus, but realistically, I think they give it lip service. And I'm curious if you're seeing that, or do you see it's like you talk about this and you get that 100% buy-in and they're like, oh, I got it. That's such a critical component. Or is it, no, that's great. That's the afterthought, but it's all about the tech. It's all about the drug. It's all about the, and then, M&As fail, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. This is a, almost lifelong soapbox item for me at this point. I mean, dating back to my work at Carnegie Mellon when I was in grad school, where, this was a million years ago, but we were working to quantify the HR function for this very reason, right? So how do you transform it and automate it in a way so that HR is actually seen as a profit center and not a cost center? And, automating the transactional operational pieces of HR so that your HR team is then released to be strategic and transformational. And this was back in the, process reengineering days and all of that stuff, which is, with the advent of AI, we got to think about process differently now anyway, right? But, I've definitely seen, and maybe it's because of my experience, and like I said, it's my personal soapbox, but I can see it a mile away when I talk to a CEO and they say, well, I'll call you after we get the drug approved. I'll call you after this, after that, after that. And, where they're just not understanding that if you've got an organization where everyone is operating at their highest and best use, and they understand what that means, and it's not even on an individual basis, but you've got your corporate strategy, which translates to your departmental strategy, which translates to your individual goals and objectives. And yet you're able to tie then individual performance to shareholder value and vice versa. That is a very strategic, very transformational way of looking at human capital and understanding that but for that highest and best use and the ability to work across silos and across teams and to bring the R&D and the commercial team together. But for that ability, it will all go sideways. And when
Yeah.
you call me after the drug is approved, okay, the drug is approved, and now we've got to go from 20 people to 200 people in less than 24 months. You've not created a foundation. You're going to get crushed under the weight of your own success.
It's that whole, if you're familiar with, and I'm sure you are, OKRs, right? Measure what matters. And it's that whole getting alignment throughout the organization is just what you're talking about. And I think having myself been in huge organizations before, you lose that and you don't have that alignment. And then they're doing their own thing over here, but it's not, there's not that direct connection. And I see that as a huge challenge. When you look at some of the best leaders that you've ever worked with or seen, what is it, and maybe you already said this, but in your mind, what is it they are absolutely doing differently that is making their organization just amazing, other than having a great product?
Yeah.
But what do you think the best leaders are doing?
I think the very best leaders are focused on, now this is going to sound, self-serving, I guess, but on their people, right? So they've built a team where they can trust in each member of that team to do what they're supposed to do, right? And they're leading in a way that they're not digging into the details. Sometimes you need to, especially in, small biotech when, we're small companies, everybody's doing 3 or 4 jobs, for a while. But, ultimately it's their motivation is to create teams that can be relied upon to do what they need to do. And they're also creating opportunities for those team members and those leaders to stretch, to go beyond their comfort zones. And then they're hiring and they're leading in their own image. And so, it's like, she tells 2 friends and she tells 2 friends and she tells 2 friends, that kind of thing, where it just kind of cascades down. And they've got a real clear definition of what great leadership looks like. And they're able to translate that in a way that they can empower their leaders to do the same. And that way, everybody, regardless of their role or their level in the organization, is super clear on what good performance, great performance is. They're super clear on what their individual contribution is and should be to the overall success of the organization. And it kind of just wraps it all up. Leaders that are perhaps, to say it another way, or but the flip side is, not as concerned about the performance of their folks, but maybe they're, more self-concerned, or, they're concerned about micromanaging these brilliant people that they've brought into the organization and not positioning them to be successful, but trying to sort of overlord over that. I think that's kind of where things go sideways too.
So, and it's interesting you brought that up, because I was going to ask you about the flip side, because they know what to do, because you tell them what to do. They can read, there's 1,000 books on leadership. They can read about it, they hear about it, they're in networking groups, they're in other C-level groups, they've got, maybe a PE or investor that's telling them, here's what you need to, but they still don't do it. Any thought on why you think, even though they know what to do, they don't do it?
I think because their currency is misplaced. And by currency, I mean, why are they doing what they're doing and what is really expected of them? So as you move up in leadership, I find that leaders, new leaders especially, and sometimes this just doesn't get solved, right? So it goes all the way up to the CEO. But, well, if I give all of this up and I empower the person that's working for me to do it, then what's left for me to do? How am I succeeding? How am I being seen as successful? And just, helping them understand that doing the thing that you've been doing for 30 years, if you're doing the same thing, that's 1 year of experience times 30. That's not 30 years of experience. And so,
Right. I love that.
Enabling the folks that work for you to grow, to lead, to expand allows you to do the same. And no one's expecting you as the CEO or as the C-suite to manage the transaction. You are managing the movement of the transactions. And so I think the currency is misplaced because they think they're being evaluated on their ability to, do regulatory better than everybody else, when they have a whole regulatory team that can do that. And they're actually supposed to be tying the regulatory strategy to the corporate strategy.
So you can tell them this. You just said it to me. You articulated it. They still won't do it. Do you, and I'm curious your perspective. My perspective, having worked with people, is there's a lot of ego that gets involved, and change is not easy. My analogy I use all the time is, getting fit. Getting fit is simple but not easy. We know what to do. There's nothing new. Eat right, exercise more, but we don't do it. Do you think there's also, and I know this is a leading question, but I'd love your opinion on this. Do you think there's ego involved as why, even though they know what to do, you're telling them what to do? Here's our end goal. If you want to get there, do this. They still don't do it. Do you think it's the ego? Do you think it's letting go? Or
Oh,
is
for
it something
sure.
totally different?
Oh, no, no, no. I mean, that's exactly what it is, because, all through your career, you've been validated and you've been rewarded for your ability to do this transactional thing or that transactional thing at the lower levels. And no one has showed you that doing that same transaction, whatever it is, faster or bigger is not the way to succeed as a leader. But that control over the process is absolutely ego driven. Releasing the control of the transactional, entities of the departmental role and taking on a more transformational leadership role is in a lot of ways a release of ego, because you're releasing the control of it. And I think that's really what gets in the way. If I can control this outcome as opposed to releasing it and empowering your folks to manage the outcome.
I think I love that perspective. One of my favorite analogies that I like to talk to CEOs about is a conductor of a symphony.
Hmm.
They might be an amazing musician themselves, right? Maybe they played violin or maybe they did something. But at some point, when you're leading an orchestra, you can't be the one that jumps down there and picks up the violin. You
Yes.
can't be the
Yeah.
star. You have to learn how to give that up and say, wait a minute, my job is the end goal is I got to make beautiful music, and I've got to make it through these 160 to 100 musicians, and I have to let go. I can't be the one doing it. And I think that's been my experience when I see the best run organizations is they have to let go
Mm-hmm.
and trust others and remember what is the actual end goal. The end goal is not be the star playing the violin anymore. The goal is make beautiful music and whatever it's going to take to do that.
I love that and will shamelessly steal it because it's a
Thank you. Just
fantastic.
remember David
I
Susan when you
will
say that, and
hashtag David Susan. Thank you very much.
there you go. You're so funny. You're so funny. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about you and your leadership. What do you think your own leadership superpower is?
That's a really good question. Being, the shoemaker's kids, right? Like we tell everybody else, but what do we do? I think my superpower is the ability to see talent and skill and potential in people when they can't see it themselves, and then pushing them in to kind of capture that and lean into their comfort zones and go beyond it. Um, I have been so proud of many of the people that have worked with and for me and being able to do that, overcoming presentation phobias, just lots of things. But, just really, they're not able to see certain areas of potential in themselves that I'm able to see, and just really encouraging and opening up and creating opportunities and sort of using my leadership level essentially to kind of facilitate that opportunity for people, is I think would be my superpower if I had to think.
Do you have a specific leadership philosophy that is any different than that, or is that it? If you said, okay, my big the way my philosophy as a leader is this.
So I think philosophically, I really believe I am not a micromanager. We're not going to get along well if I have to micromanage you. I'm very much a big believer in clearly articulating the path, the goal, the strategy, aligning on the approach, and then releasing you to do it. And so where things have not gone so well in terms of leadership relationships for me have been where, okay, so we've aligned, we've agreed, we know the path, I know you can do it, and then I have to come behind you and do it, or you're coming back, where I really just want you to trust in yourself and do it. Mistakes are great. Mistakes are fine. I philosophically believe that as a leader, you have to allow room for that, because that's where growth comes, right? And we can always fix mistakes, but what we can't fix is an unwillingness to try. Because, I look at my teams as a cumulative effort, right, to achieve whatever goal that we're looking at. And so I need you to, sort of take the challenge on and go for it. I really love that.
And why do you think they don't? When people don't and you have to step in, what do you think the reason is?
Whenever I've experienced that, it's because they're carrying trauma from another leadership relationship, another management relationship where there was not space and safety in trying and in failing. And, so their natural tendency is to be very risk averse and to just, and over time, we get there, right? So it doesn't have to happen immediately. But, when it just never happens, or, when I've sort of guided you around, this is what I'd like to see. This is how I'd like to see you approach it. This is less about the steps and it's more about the mindset. When the mindset doesn't change, that's when I start to get a little frustrated. But more often than not, once that safety is truly received and understood and believed in, people just blossom, in my experience, under that kind of scenario.
Well, that's the goal, right? That they
That's
do.
the goal.
They do. How about as you look at yourself personally, right, Sonya, and you look in the mirror and you say, and if you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable with me, what do you think an area, let's say you're an 8, right? Or a 9 in your ability to lead or whatever. What is it for you? What does it take to move to the next level? What's an area you want to need to get better at from a leadership perspective that would take everything to the next level?
Oh, that's a good question. I have my own, maybe this is, I don't know if this is causality or correlation, but, I have my own control issues. And,
I'm just kidding.
it's just, sometimes it's easier to just do it myself. And as an entrepreneur, really investing in the people, the systems, the things that can take those, if my efforts are, can earn me $1,000, right? There are other things that have to be done that would bring in, $100, right? So I need to offset the $100 tasks so that I can focus on the $1,000 tasks. And so, as an entrepreneur, as a leader in that space, releasing the control of just a lot of the things that are going to be necessary and to grow the business is something that I'm really leaning into now in this next phase. And just sort of crossing that fear bridge of, okay, I will let you craft that email for me. I will let you take a first stab at that social media post. And so, getting all of those systems and those background things to a place where I don't have to have my hand in them, so I can focus on the things that only I can do, is probably where my blind spot is. But I'm working on it.
I love that. At least you're aware of it. It's amazing. We wouldn't have the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apple, the Oracles of the world, the KPMGs, et cetera, if people had held on, right? And
Mhm.
it's really remarkable in these huge organizations that those founders, those leaders were able to do that.
Yeah.
And whether they did it by design or they did it because, hey, I'm overwhelmed and there's now there's no way I can do it. It's interesting. But I think the sooner in any level, right? I don't want to just talk entrepreneurship. You could be in a major corporation and be a manager or VP, but the sooner we learn how to let go and have trust and patience in our people,
Hmm.
it allows us to really grow and expand. So I love that you recognize that. That's really cool. So
Yeah,
good for you.
it's very interesting because um I'm a coach, right? I mean, that's a big part of what I do. And I have finally in the last year resigned to the fact that, I also need a coach. And, that's been really transformational for me. It's you don't always as a trainer, I don't like to go to training as an example. I don't like to be trained. I don't like to be facilitated. But having a coach has really been amazing for me.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge
Definitely.
difference. It's just, if nothing else, it's that reflection in the mirror that comes back at you.
Hmm.
So
Exactly.
I want to close with one last question here, and that is, what's the question you wish people would ask you, but they don't, or they don't know to ask you?
Yeah, you know what? I love that question. I would love it if someone would ask me, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it's because, I've realized as I'm sort of curating this next chapter of my life and my career, what springboarded that was a conversation that I had with my now senior daughter at NYU. She was a sophomore at the time. And we were just having one of those discussions where she's just buzzing around about, oh, I don't know what to major in. And I need an internship and all this. And, she's very energetic and cool that way. And I was just so enjoying the conversation with her. And I was like, wow, she's got her whole life ahead of her. That's so cool. And, after we hung up, I kind of sat with that feeling a bit and I realized, I have my whole life ahead of me too. And, but the benefit of 30 additional years of lived experience, right? So how do I honor that and align that and curate my own next step? Because I do have my whole life ahead of me. And I think whatever age you are, whatever stage of life you're in, we should never stop asking ourselves, what do we want to be when we grow up? Because it can and should change, and it should honor and align with the person that you are and the person that you want to be. And so you don't need to be a 19-year-old in your dorm asking yourself that question. You could also be like me.
Like you, or older, yeah. So
Yeah.
do you know, you don't have to tell me the answer, but in your mind, do you know what the answer is?
I do. I do. That's why I started the Catalytic Collective. It is very, in a very purposeful, very intentional way, creating and redoing the way that I do business and creating a business environment for myself that allows me to have slower mornings. So I'm not jumping on my text or on my Slack or on my email as soon as I get up, before I get up even out of the bed. Allows me some location freedom. I've got kids in San Francisco, LA, and New York. So I'm now building my business around those locations, and I'm able to, travel to see. I'm on my way to San Francisco in a couple of weeks to see a client, and I get to see my oldest at the same time. So that kind of freedom, that's what this next stage of life looks like for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I love your answers. I love that you shared that and you were vulnerable and your perspective. I loved hearing that today. If
Thank you.
people want to learn more about you, about the collective, et cetera, what's the best way to either reach you or learn more?
Yeah, so I can be reached at the collective. We've got a website, thecatalyticcollective.com. And if you're an early stage biotech CEO or organization, you want to work with me there, you can find me at the next stage, no, not the next stage bioadvisors.com.
And I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes if people want to find you, reach out to you. All right.
All
Well,
right.
Sonya, it has been an absolute pleasure having you with me. I so appreciate that you took the time with us today.
No, thank you for asking me. This has been fun.
My pleasure. Well, folks, that's Inside the Leader's Mind. I'm David Susan, and we'll see you next time. Bye.